Many softwares do Gantt charts badly. They often are generated from tasks and aren't interactive or have many other issues. I'm happy to tell you that ClickUp has fantastic Gantt chart functionality. It's aesthetic, it's interactive, and it's really easy to use. All the things we've come to expect from ClickUp. Version 1.0 did have an issue, as you can see here, where it's a global view, and every time you want to go into something, you have to drill down into each of the levels in order to find the list that you actually want to see. However, because in 2.0, views are specific to either lists, folders, or spaces, that's no longer an issue. You can jump to exactly where you want to see. Okay, I'm in my list, and this list is for world domination. It's a to-do list for a slightly muddled evil genius. Okay, so first things, I want to show you some ClickApps because they relate quite heavily to Gantt charts. So if I go into my space settings and ClickApps, we have dependency warning and remap subtask due dates. Now these functionalities are quite small, but it is good to know about them. So dependency warnings will trigger when you try to complete a task that is dependent on another task. So if I went into renovate here and said it is complete, closed, it will say, oh, no, actually this is dependent on something else. Are you sure you want to do this? And you can say yes, or you can cancel. Although in this case, when I clicked cancel, it went to closed. That will hopefully get fixed. Next one, remap subtasks due dates. This doesn't really apply to Gantt charts too much because of a current issue where when you move a task, it treats it as moving on a Gantt view. It doesn't necessarily remap the due date. Hopefully by the time you watch this, that will have been fixed, but at the moment, that's the way it's working. So if we jump to list view, we can see if I open some subtasks, we can see I've got a subtask here. Its due date is yesterday, whereas the parent task isn't due until September the 11th. So I'm going to change that date on the parent task. So due date we can change to, we'll put it 2 days ahead, okay, to September the 13th. Done. And this is what happens. So it pops up a little box here that says, should we also change the subtask dates as well? And we'll say yes. Okay, and what you'll see here is now the subtask due date has changed to tomorrow. Interesting. A lot of softwares, when you enable dependencies, will force the start date to be after the end date of the task it was dependent on, or other functionalities like that. However, that's not how ClickUp works. What ClickUp does is it allows you to set the time between the tasks, and then once you enable the dependency, it will maintain that distance as you move one. So it doesn't force them to be, the correct order. But if you do say that this one's dependent on this one, and it's 2 days afterwards, then if you change the date of the first, the second one will always be 2 days afterwards. So that's why when we changed it 2 days forward, the due date of this one changed from yesterday to tomorrow, 2 days forward. All right, let's jump back to the Gantt view. Now, in our view, we've got our normal sidebar list over here. I might just collapse that. And now we've got all of our tasks that are in this list, the item that I've selected. And we can see their dates on the Gantt chart. Now we can change the time period. So we can go from the biggest as year. We can see what's happening across the years, months, weeks, which is probably where I normally sit, and or days, which is also very handy. Now you will notice in days that it has cut out the weekends. You can put those back in. I'll show you that later. The last one though is really interesting, and that's by hour. So this is kind of like within one day, when are things happening. As you can see from my application here, this is not very useful. I don't have any tasks that are smaller than 1 day. However, if you're doing something like event planning, this could be super, super helpful. So you see when things are happening, what things need to happen before other things happen, particularly like something like if you're shooting on site. So this could be a really, really good use case for that. All right, I'm going to jump back to day. Oh, and also, if you do get lost at any point, you're just out in the middle of nowhere, you can hit this today button and it'll jump you back right to where today is. It's actually surprisingly helpful. You can close this list if you do want to see a little bit more as well. And over here, you can show different columns. So for example, if you want to show assignees, you can have it beside, it won't show on the Gantt chart itself. There is another way of doing that, but it can show in this little side panel. So if you do want to see a little bit more information whilst you're also viewing the Gantt chart, you can do that there, which is really cool. Okay, next I'll show you dragging tasks onto the Gantt chart, and this is super easy. So I'm just going to pause for a second and create a few new tasks here. Okay, so our evil genius is designing a death ray and doing a few tasks that need to be done with that. So I'm going to jump forward till the end of our plan. Dragging and dropping onto the Gantt chart is as simple as clicking, holding, moving it over, and then letting go. Now you'll notice that nothing happened, but what it does have is this click and drag forward to schedule box. So now anywhere on here, we can decide when we want this task to start. I'll say kind of like midday on October 3rd, and then drag it to when we want it to end. So midday on October 8th. Let go, and then we'll put it in there for us. Okay, a couple of things. You'll see that when you hover over in the middle of a task, it will show this kind of 2-arrow cursor, and that allows you to move the task around. As you see, if I move it towards the end here, the overall task time is increasing. If you want to shorten or lengthen a task, you can hover over these two little lines on the end. You do need the cursor to go to the two lines with the arrows on the other side, and then you can shorten or lengthen the task. These two little pins on the top and bottom are for enabling dependencies. So let's chuck our second task onto the Gantt. Oops. It does need to be somewhat in line, otherwise it gets confused. There we go. Okay, I'm going to move this forward a little bit. Now I want to make this one dependent on this one. So this can't start to happen until this one is finished. So what I'll do is I'll move it till after the end date because ClickUp won't do that for you. But I will grab this little pin and create a dependency. So this one is now dependent on that one. And same thing, I'll put this one onto the timeline. And then I'll drag and drop to create the time, shorten it a little bit, and then create another dependency. Okay, so that's dependencies, moving, and resizing. Now the last thing I want to show you is this little top bar up here. So we can sort tasks. I'm just going to jump to the week view so we can see things a little bit clearer. Now you see that my Gantt chart is kind of all over the place. You know, it's not sequential. I don't really like that. So I'm going to go into sorting and sort by due date. And that's going to put things in a lovely kind of like waterfall type order. So we can see we start up here and make our way through all the tasks. We can also choose to show or hide subtasks. So currently subtasks are being hidden. I'm going to turn them on, and we've jumped in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to go to our today button. And now we can see we have extra subtasks put in here. They do have the little subtask logo beside them, so it's easy to see. Okay, color tasks by. This is super cool. So you currently see I have two blue ones here because these ones are being colored by status. So blue is in process, whereas all the gray ones are still open. Now I'm going to change that to color by list. Now because we're only looking at one list currently, everything goes to the color of that list. Our list color is currently yellow. We could change that or add an extra color. So if we change that to perhaps say blue, we'll see that all of these change to blue. Now with one list, that's not that useful, but if you can imagine you're viewing a whole space and you have maybe 4 or 5 different lists and they're all kind of mixed together because different tasks are interspersed, then it can be really useful to color code by list to see what type of thing is happening next and in what order. And the last one is priority. This is also really cool because we can see even though some tasks are happening a little bit later, some of them are really high priority. And that's a really aesthetic view. I quite like it. The last one is color by type. Frankly, I don't know what this is. Okay, I've got it figured out. So I've gone into my everything view here and created a Gantt chart and colored by type. So now we can see that these spaces are light gray, folders are dark gray, lists are green, and tasks are blue. Now this actually applies to just about every other coloring as well. If we go into status, we'll see that the spaces, folders, and lists are still the same. The coloring only applies to the tasks themselves. So I'm not sure quite how useful this is, but if you do want to just see things purely by level, then you can color by type. I'm going to step this back to priority because I quite like the look of it. And the last one is view settings. So we see we can show assignee if we do want to see on the Gantt chart exactly who's assigned to each task. We can show the priority as well as the time estimate, which can be useful when setting the length. We can show the status, and that just comes up in a little dot, and that's particularly useful if we're not coloring by status. We can still get the information. Now, reschedule dependencies. This is the really useful one. So we can see that currently this task is dependent on this task, and we can move them separately. But if I want to move this one and have all of its dependent tasks also move, I can lock the reschedule dependencies. So now if I were to move this task, it's going to move the one that's dependent on that, and the one that's dependent on that, and the one that's dependent on that. It'll automatically reorder all of them. If I move a later one, it will only move the ones that are dependent on that, not the ones that it's dependent on. Typically, the way that I think you'd use it best is to turn this off, organize everything in the kind of order you want it with the right amount of gaps between each task, and then lock it, and that will allow you to very quickly reorder, or if something is delayed, push back all tasks that are affected by it. We can see there's a slider here for use weekends. Now in this week view, we can see the whole week already, but if we were to go into the day view, we'll see that the weekends are missing. So if you are running over the weekends and you do need to see that, you can turn on weekends, and then you'll see those days there as well. When you go to turn off weekends, if you have anything scheduled on the weekend, it will give you a pop-up box saying that they will automatically be scheduled on Monday, which is typically what you want. So that's fine. We can also calculate the critical path. This will turn the critical path pink. Okay, and I'm going to turn my subtasks off so it's a bit more compressed. I imagine this jumping in the middle of nowhere will get fixed soon, so hopefully that won't affect you. And we can see that our critical task is pink here. Now this doesn't appear to be functioning properly because each of these dependencies should also turn pink, but that's not currently happening. I imagine that will be fixed soon. Okay, I'm just going to turn that off. Now also notice that this list, the entire list, has its own bar, and it has a percentage done. That percentage is automatically calculated from the tasks that are done within that list. So I really like that. That's awesome. And of course, we have our regular filters, so we can filter to only see certain tasks. In particular, the me mode here might be quite useful if you don't want to see the whole Gantt chart, but only the ones where you have something assigned, and you can just choose if it's comments, subtasks, checklists, or any selection thereof. So you can see on which days are tasks assigned to you and which ones have dependencies. Maybe you want to check that to make sure when you're prioritizing your tasks to see which ones lots of other things are dependent on. If your team would like some more training on this, or you need some help setting up your ClickUp, I will put a consulting link in the description below. Otherwise, if you do have questions or things that you'd like to see a video on next, chuck that in the comments. I'll be looking at those and basing what videos I'm making next based on that. If you did find this video helpful, hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. All right, I'll see you in the next video.